Right. We're going to start from the Mishnah Tzadik Beis and Wood Beis. I'm sorry about yesterday not being live, but it was out of time. Okay. Says the Mishnah Tzadik Beis and Wood Beis. Hamiskaven lohitzi lefonov. Person intends to carry something in front of him, ubole le'acharav, and it swings around behind him, potter. Le'acharav ubole lefonov. If it was behind him and went in front of him, chayav. The Gemara will explain why. But here's a nice picture of it. He's carrying a bag in front of him, in front of his chest, and it swings behind him. Or alternatively, he carries behind him and it swings in front of him. That's the two cases of a Mishnah. A woman who's wearing this kind of underskirt, a slip, and she hangs something on the skirt, then whether it goes in front, whether it goes behind, she's chayav. Why? This particular garment would go round and round. It wasn't attached very well, and therefore it's possible for it to slip round. So therefore, you can't say I had intention to do it one way and it went the other way, because at the end of the day, it's normal for it to slip around. Also those who get letters. I just want to show a picture of the letters. Here's a person running with letters, and if you can see, it's swinging behind his neck. So even if he has intention to do it in front of him, it swings behind his neck, he's chayav. Why? Because in the process of running around from place to place, it was often that it would slip behind. In the first case, it was a bit rare, and therefore you're potter, because you've not done the Issa D'Oraisa of Yitzhak Shabbos. But in this case, since it was so common and so normal, one is chayav. Just say one of the things like this, that Rashi actually said that his Rebbe's told him a different pshat in this last line of the Mishnah. And that his Rebbe's told him that interesting pshat, that the king would sometimes say to somebody, deliver a message to another king. And what he would do is, he would have to find somebody going directly to the other king. And sometimes he wouldn't find the right messenger. So he would send it to a different messenger, hoping that eventually it would get through. So therefore, the chiddush of the Mishnah is not because it went round from the front to the back, but rather because he delivered the message to the wrong person. And the chiddush is because eventually it will get to the right person, that's chayav. That's Rashi's mahalach. Rashi himself says, I don't appreciate this pshat, and I worry about it. So therefore, because of that, the Rishonim are more noted to the other pshat. It means either the letter carriers were discussing a situation where it was in front and behind, or he delivered the message to the wrong person. So Gemara says like this. Why is it that if a person intends to carry something in front of him and it slips behind him, that he's potter? He intended to carry it in front, it went behind, so he never did his intention. Since he never did his intention, what he wanted to do never happened. So therefore, he never did the malacha of Shabbos. What's the difference between if a person plans to carry it in front of him and it slips behind him, that is potter, or if a person plans to carry something behind him and it ends up going in front of him, that is chayav? Why should there be any difference? If you need that person should carry the way he intended to carry, so in all cases it should be potter. And if you don't care whether he carries the way he wanted to carry, in all cases it should be chayav. It's a question, it's broken. Abloza says, indeed, the Mishnah is being said by two separate tanoim. Why would you say such a thing? What's the question? What's better, to carry something in front of you or something behind you? Obviously, when you carry a bag in front of you, it's less likely to be stolen. So therefore, when you carry a bag in front of you and it slips behind you, so therefore what's happened is you intended to carry with a good shmir, with a good protection, and it slipped behind, so therefore you've ended up with a weaker shmir. But when you plan to carry it behind you, and then it went in front of you, in fact, you've not lost anything out. In fact, you've actually got a better protection. My question, if it's you plan to do in front of it came behind, how do you tell me the potter? The reason you're potter, the discover the shmir mulav, also the shmir b'chusa. A person was carrying a bag in front of him, and it slips behind him. In that particular situation, he never had, the action he did was not the action he wanted. The action he wanted was to carry it in a very good, protected manner. By slipping behind him, it's now being carrying it in a weaker manner. But if it was behind him and he went in front of him, But if you plan to carry it behind his back and he slipped in front of his back, in front of him, so then he hasn't lost anything. On the contrary, now the Shiur is even better. So how could you say that the Mishnah is being so itself? There's no steer whatsoever. In fact, the Mishnah makes a lot of sense. That means the Mishnah says when a person intends to carry in front, it means he wants to protect it, and he slips behind and he's potter. But behind and then went in front, where it's even better, is chayv. Says the Gemara, and my kusha, what was the question? Do you could ask this in kasha? There's still a kasha in our Mishnah. If you medayek the Mishnah, you get a kasha. What's the kasha? And this cabinet, it's in the front of a person tends to take it in front and came behind him potter. Why is he potter? Because he never did what he really wanted. He wants to carry it in front of him behind. If a person carries behind, which is not a very good way of carrying, and it stayed behind, he's chayav, because at the end of the day, that's what intention was. That only if it actually came in front of him is chayav. That means you can medayek from the second half of the Mishnah. If a person carries behind and it stays behind, is potter, because at the end of the day, he never did a proper shmira. So the diuk of the Reisha, which is mashma the lachav or bol lachav, is chayav, and the diuk of the sefer, which is mashma the lachav or bol lachav, is potter, is a stira. It's a broken one who says this one didn't say this one. No. It is true that if you carry behind and it stays behind, of course you're chayav. The chiddush is if you carry behind and it went in front, even though it's a better protection, but the reality is that you never got what you wanted. You wanted to carry it behind and it ended up going in front. So you might have thought that even though it's a better protection, but since it never worked out the way you planned it to work out, so therefore you should be potter. That's the chiddush. This have machshavta, of course, if you carried behind and it stayed behind, then you're chayav because you did what you wanted. And but even if it's behind and goes in front, it's tzichalei. That's the chiddush. Since he never did what he wanted, he shouldn't be chayav. That means our Mishnah is telling us very briefly like this. A person who carries it and it gets carried the way he wanted, that means he carried it either behind and it stayed behind, or he carried it in front and stayed in front, of course it's chayav. If a person carried it behind and it went in front, he's also chayav, because at the end of the day he didn't lose anything out of it, it actually went better. The only case a person's potter is if he intended to carry it in front and he went behind, then he is potter, because at the end of the day it was worse. Says the Gemara similarly, the Gemara wants to suggest that it's a machlukas tanoim. Why? The Tanya, person carries money in a wallet, in a purse, and the opening is above. It's a bit like these bags some people wear around the chests, where it's like, I think it's called a bum bag or something. But what happens is you've got many pockets and you put your money inside. So where the entrance, the opening is up, of course you chayav, because that's the proper way of carrying. What happens if a person walks around with a money belt, but the money belt, the opening of the money belt is facing downwards, which is a ridiculous way of carrying a money belt. Why? Because if you carry a money belt like that, it's very easy for the money to fall out because you made the opening of the money belt facing downwards. So what's the din if somebody carries a money belt with its opening facing downwards, which is easy for things to fall out? So what's the din? Yehuda says, and more explains why. This is what he wanted. He wanted to carry it upside down for whatever reason. And just like a person wants to carry it behind him, and he ended up behind him is chayav, also this is chayav. If a person carries something on the back of his hand, or balancing it on his foot, then of course it's potter. Why? Because it's a very strange way of carrying. Similarly, a person carries a wallet, a money bag, a money belt, and the entrance, the opening of the money belt is facing downwards. It's like carrying on the back of your hand. You're carrying it in a very unusual manner. I said one thing, they said something else. I never found a good answer to their attack. And they never found a good reply to my question. Since he said to them, don't you agree? The fact that Chum see your potter, when the money belt's upside down, And Rabbi Yehuda compares his case to the situation of a person carrying behind him and it stays behind him. The Chayra, it seems that just like Rabbi Yehuda says you're potter in a chayev, the Chacham say you're potter regarding a money belt upside down, the Chacham also say you're potter regarding a parcel which you're carrying in front, which you're carrying behind and it stays behind. Says all the time, they said to me, Mechlad mechayv Rabbi Yehuda is Rabbi Yehuda mechayv or Tanya lacha yodoi beraglo tibba kol potter. Everybody agrees that if a person carries on the back of his hand, balancing something back of his hand, or balancing something on his foot, that is potter. So obviously Rabbi Yehuda agrees to that. So the Gemara says no. The pshat is like this. Ki pligi bepundosu pilamato. Mamedam lelachov volelachov. Mamedam lelacha yodoi beraglo. That means everybody agrees that if you carry something balancing on the back of your hand or on your foot, that you're potter. It's not a normal way of carrying. Everybody agrees that if you carry something behind your back, like a rucksack, and it stays behind your back, since you intended to carry like that, you're chayav. Oh, it's not a particularly good way to guard it. So what? I obviously don't care. I'm happy to have the bag hanging behind my back. This is the way I want to carry it. And this is the way I ended up carrying it. It never slipped aside. So therefore, I'm chayav. That everybody agrees. The machlokes is only when I carry a money belt upside down. According to Rabbi Yehuda, it's the same as carrying something behind your back, where the halacha is yechayev, because you see that you don't care about the shmiros. Also over here, you don't care about the shmiros, so yechayev. Because the chum know, when you carry a money belt upside down, it is so unusual. It is like carrying something balanced on the back of your hand, the back of or on your leg, that you're pot. Says whenever the Mishnah uses the expression be'emes amu, they said truthfully, that is a halacha which is mekubal according to everybody, and some say it's in halacha Moshe Messina and Yechayev. And we have to keep to it. The scribes of the king would do that. So we've got two pshatim. Either the scribes of the king would be rushing around so much that many things which they intended to carry in front of them would slip behind them. So therefore, since it's normal, therefore it's considered carrying. Alternatively, according to Rashi's pshat, the scribes of the king, they were told to give instructions to one messenger, and if they couldn't find that messenger, they would give it to another messenger. So therefore, you're chayav. Says a new Mishnah. Person carries a loaf of bread outside his house, he's chayav. If two people carry one loaf of bread, and here you've got a picture of it. So here's one person carrying a loaf of bread. So here's one. So he's chayav. But here's two people carrying one loaf of bread. Sorry, it's hard to see. It's mirror image. Here, two people carrying one loaf of bread, you're potter. We'll see in the Gemara exactly why. But the basic message is when two people carry it together, since a loaf of bread is a very light thing, for two people to carry it together, it's not the malacha has to be done by one person. Here it's two people. If one person can't carry it, and two people carry it, so here you've got a loaf of bread which is so big that one person can't possibly carry it on his own. Since one person can't carry such a loaf of bread on his own, so if two people carry it, one is chayav. So again, if our Mishnah, we'll see later there's more shittahs, but our Mishnah says two opinions. One opinion is that when a person can carry it himself and two people carry it, then he's potter. But if two people are needed to carry it, then he is chayav. Rabbi Shimon says you're always potter. And let's just clarify Rabbi Shimon. Rabbi Shimon's shittah is, it doesn't make any difference. You can be carrying a very heavy piece of wood and you need two people to carry it. They're only chayav on Shabbos if you do the entire malacha by yourself. And since over here, it required two people to do the malacha, so therefore you're potter. Even though you needed both people's help, Mashik and the Tanna Kama holds no. If it was possible to carry with one person, two people carry it, then you're potter. But if you needed two people to carry it, then you're chayav. I just say briefly over here a story which is very, very well documented. It's brought down in the book To Remain a Jew and in many other books. And it's a very, very famous story. A group of Mira Bochim was sent to Siberia by the Russians. And one of the jobs they had to do was they had to carry wood, cut down wood, and carry it for the war efforts for the Russians. And the problem was on Shabbos, it's a deraisa to carry wood because it's a carrying Nushas Rabim. So what did they do? They came up, they're relying on this Mishnah. As we said, either way it is also, even if a person, two people carry a loaf of bread, it is also. But the minimizing thing is also a good thing. So what they did was, they would walk less than 4 hours and stop, and then another less than 4 hours and stop, and then that way they never carried 4 hours in one go. And the second thing is they would carry very light pieces of wood, and they would carry it in groups of 2. So they would take up a small twig, and 2 people would carry it. Thereby, it was Shnaim She'asu, 2 people doing a light piece of wood, 1 person can carry. And by having 2 people carrying it, therefore what happened was, they made it double Durabonans. First of all, they're doing less than 4 hours, and second of all, they were doing 2 people carrying a light twig. What happened was, one of the Russian officials was looking out of his window, and he sees these healthy young men walking less than 4 hours, like 1.5 meters, stopping for rest, and then another 1.5 meters, and 2 people carrying a small piece of wood together. He got extremely, extremely angry. He had never seen such laziness before, and he wanted to have them court-martialed because it was middle of the war, so middle of the Second World War, and he wanted to have them all executed, and that's what they thought was going to happen. Only by Ashkocha Protis, there was another Russian official that was traveling from town to town, and he stopped by this particular camp, which these soldiers were being imprisoned for their laziness of not helping the war. And he was actually a Yid. Unfortunately, he wasn't from anymore. But he investigated to find out what happened, and he was a very high up official, so he had the right to override the local commandant office, and he asked what's the story. They told him. So he called in the Bach and said, what's going on? What in the world were you thinking of doing? So they explained to him that they wanted to minimize Chilul Shabbos. So he called in the commander of the camp, and he said, during the week, the rest of the days, are these boys working hard? He said, yes, it's just today that they're being so difficult. So he said, well, from now on, I want you to let them go, because after all, you see during the week they work well. I want you to double the ration of bread, which for them was a huge saving, because they were so starved there. And you can let them off on Shabbos, they can continue in this way, because obviously on Shabbos they need to work less hard. Just this amazing Ashkocha Protis that he was traveling just at that time, and he was ready to help them out. But you see that if a person does need to carry in a place where there's no Eruv, so what he can do is ask 2 people to carry. Let's say he has to carry a I remember once a Rav telling me that he lived in a place where it wasn't like in the Eruv, and his child wasn't feeling so well. He went to the doctor, gave him some medicine. And it's a big problem carrying medicine when there's no Eruv. So what he found, if you know Hilchos Shabbos very well, you can actually find loads of ways to do kulas. One of the ways would be with a small bottle of medicine, is to have 2 people carry it together, and then you've already saved yourself one issa. This is what our Mishnah says. If 1 person carries it and 2 people carry it, that's not a proper issa d'oraisa. Says the Gemara, Omar Yehuda Marav. Says Yehuda Marav. Vomi lo ma'abai, and some say ma'abai. Vomi lo ma'astitaton, and some say it's a brisa. The brisa is going to bring 3 opinions regarding this question of 2 people doing the job of 1 person. Ze yochel, v'ze yochel. Each person could easily carry this loaf of bread. Rameir mechayev, Rameir says yechayev. Why? Because at the end of the day, Rameir holds that whenever 2 people do it, you always chayev. He doesn't hold of this color. If this person can't, this person can't. They're both a mechayev of shum poiter. This one can, this one can't. Everything is a chayev. So let's go through very briefly the 3 shittas. Rameir holds whenever 2 people do a job, it makes no difference if it's an easy job or heavy, if it's a light load or a heavy load. Rameir says it's always chayev. Rav Shimon says, whenever 2 people do a job, it's always potter, because the Torah only says 1 person, not 2 people. So you go over there on one extreme that 2 people do a job, they're always chayev. Rav Shimon, the other extreme, that says 2 people do a job, they're always potter. And Rabbi Yehuda, who makes a difference. Rabbi Yehuda says like this: if it's a job which requires 2 people and 2 people do it, you're chayev, because that's the normal way of doing it. If it's a job that requires 1 person and 2 people do it, then you're potter. Because Rabbi Yehuda goes in between. He says it depends if you need 2 people or not. Says the Gemara, Tani Nami Ochi, we have another bias the same. Hamoitzki kol shusurabi mechayev. Oitzio ishnaim, two people took it out of Mem Mechayev, Yodema, Im lo yochel echel lo oitzio ishnaim. If one person can't carry it out, and two people carry it chayovin. Vim la peturin. If not, they're potem. Rabbi Shimon patters. He always patters. There's a very interesting thesis on Tzadik Gimel Amud Aleph, the fourth thesis. The thesis establishes what does it mean when one person can't carry it on his own. So in the picture I showed earlier, which I'll show again, the reason why one person can't carry it, because we're talking about a huge loaf of bread, maybe a loaf of bread for a big chasna or something, a chasna. So that's why one person can't carry it, therefore you need two people. Thesis comes along with a very big chiddush. And he says like this, it's not necessarily talking about a very big loaf of bread. We could be talking about a situation where each person only uses one finger to carry it. Or they're carrying it in a manner which what happens is they are not able to carry very much. And that's why you need two people. So therefore that's also chayav. It's not necessarily that their strength can't cope with it. If they carry it in a way which requires two people to carry, let's say it's a long string, and they could wrap it up and carry it to get it one way. But they decide to carry it in a way which requires two, each person holds one to one end. So then you're chayav, because it's not a matter of strength, it's a matter of manner. And I read the words of Tosfos. Even if it's very strong, let's say each person only gives one finger to the loaf of bread. So then, even if it's a light loaf of bread, you need two fingers to carry it. Because the ik and the kuda is, you needed both people to help. Says the Gemara, how do we know these three opinions? Let's go through the three opinions again. It's very good to have it clear in our minds. Rameir says if two people do a job, always chayav. Rabbi Shimon says if two people do a job, always potter. Rabbi Yehuda says it depends. If one person can do it on his own and two people do it, you're potter because you're doing it very unusual. If you need two people, you're chayav. Says the Gemara, we should more explain later when one person does it, he does the entire thing. Or he says, Kulov, he says, you have to do the entire malacha, not half. Two people holding on to one pitchfork and they're pitching the produce, right? They're throwing the produce with a pitchfork and they're both holding on to the same pitchfork, which is completely unnecessary. They're holding on to a stick, which has got a sharp end. We talked about this many times. You have threads all lined up. Now the threads sometimes get tangled before you do the weaving process. So you take a stick and you make sure that all the threads are straight. So two people holding on to the same stick and straightening the threads, which is a job which can easily be done by one person. Or bekulmus, two people holding on to the same pen, the kosin, and the writing. Can you imagine two people holding on to one pen and writing? Well, obviously one person can do it himself. On the contrary, having two people doing it together makes the job even harder, not easier. Or because they're holding on to a small reed, a quill. Two people holding on to one quill. It's very easy. You might tell these people should be chayav. It does it. Or he says, somebody does the entire job. And therefore here, they only did half the job because let's say you hold two people holding on to a quill to write. You've not done the whole job. Top of Tzadik Gimel Amud Aleph. The eagles shall develop if they're holding on to a big dried cake of figs, which is very heavy. Or bekoiro with a big beam. Then if one person can't carry it, and two people carry it, even if one person can't carry it, but two people carry it, they're potter because of Shimon holds two people that do a job are always potter. If one person does it, two people do it, they're potter. The Bible says, but Michael Mifliki, the High Court, arguing regarding this particular passage. The passage is like this. The passage is referring to Chas V'Shalom, a person is Mechalel Shabbos, it doesn't have Avera by mistake. And what's the din? He has to be a Korban Chatos. This is the passage that teaches us the halachas of Korban Chatos. And the passage said like this. If you look very carefully in this passage, 3 times in one pasuk, It emphasizes the singular, meaning that one person did the job. Nefesh is Lashon Yochid, because if it would be Lashon Rabim, we would say Nefashos. So Nefesh is one. Achas is also one. But so he does it all. So there are three references to this pasuk that we're talking about one person doing an entire malacha. So we're going to have three diyukim to tell us that one person is doing a whole malacha. How do we explain it? Rab Shimon Sova. So there are some miyutim. There are three miyutim. Nefesh techta, one person does the avera. Achas techta, individual does the avera. Basoisa techta. Chad, one miyut, the miyut is meniach. If each miyut, whenever we have a miyut, we use it for the least chiddush. Once you have a second miyut, it tells you even a bigger chiddush, and the third miyut tells you even a bigger chiddush. So each time it has to tell you an extra chiddush. So therefore, chad the miyut is meniach. This one uproots, this one puts down. Why? Because each person only did half the malacha. One did the akiva, one did the anocha, so of course you're potter. One to exclude the case where both of them were able to do it on their own, and they do it together, that they're potter. I want to exclude the one case where he can't and he can't. That means even if each one can't do it on his own, they do it together, Shimon says it's potter. Because Shimon understands from the pasuk there are three miyutim, three exclusions. One, if one person does akiyah, one person does anocha. One exclusion, if they both do the job and each one could have done it themselves. Or the third exclusion, when they both did it and neither one could do it themselves. Rabbi Yehuda, he agrees with that miyut. Because that indeed is potter, because each one can do it. Rabbi Yehuda holds the third miyut is coming to us a completely different halacha. And that is, if based in Pascha, that this particular avera is permitted. Let's say Beis Din would make a mistake and they would say that one's allowed to carry on Shabbos. And one then, by mistake, then one carries on Shabbos. According to Rabbi Yehuda, he's potter from a korban chatos. If the tzibur would do it, we'd have to bring a pahelim dover shel tzibur. But over here, we're not talking about tzibur, we're talking about a yochid. A yochid that does it after the Beis Din paskand, then he's potter. Rabbi Shimon Yochid also was based in the chayav. He holds that you're chayav, and therefore the miyut is not coming for that. The miyut is coming for something else to tell us that if each one can't do it on their own, nevertheless they're still potter if they do it together. He understands the nefesh achas is not two separate miyutim. Nefesh, one, could have said nefashas. Achas is one, because it doesn't say, because achas means one. He understands nefesh achas. One nefesh is one miyut. So he only has two miyutim in this psukim. So therefore, shrei miyut eksivi. Chad miyut zeokev zemeniach. One to be made if the person does one person does akiyah, one person does anocha. Chad miyut yochid shasvas Beis Din. And one to exclude somebody who does it on the psak of Beis Din. So therefore, we have three shittas. Rabbi Shimon holds there are three miyutim. Each one tell you a bigger chiddush. One, if one person does akiyah, one person does anocha. One, if two people do it, and neither of them, and both of them could have done it on their own. And one, even if each one can't do it on their own, at the end of the day, one is potter. So Shimon says two people do malacha, they're always potter. The Meir says one is always chayav, because he doesn't include these miyutim. He only has two miyutim, because he dashes nefesh achas as one miyut. And therefore, it's coming to tell us that Okev is a Meniach is potter, and Yochid also was based on is chayav. He's also potter. And the Yehuda goes in between, and we pass like a Yehuda, and that's our Mishnah, Shittas of Yehuda. Because our Mishnah goes like a Yehuda, that it depends whether a person is able to do it on his own or not. If a person is able to do it on his own, and he gets somebody else to help him, he's potter, because at the end of the day, he's not doing it to complete malacha. If he can't do it on his own, and somebody helps him, then he's chayav. Says the Gemara, Omama, Zeh yochel v'zeh no yochel. One person can and one person can't. Everybody agrees with chayav. Says, well, I'm chayav. Let's say I'm very weak and I've got Shua is very strong. And we're carrying this beam. Shua could really carry it on his own, but I can't carry it on my own. And when the two of us carry the beam together, so which one is chayav? Do you say Sure, I could carry it on his own. Since he can carry it on his own, so therefore by me helping him, I'm doing very, very little. So therefore he's chayav. Or do you say, no, I will never be able to carry it on my own. It's only through him that I'm able to carry it. So therefore maybe I'm chayav. Which one is chayav? Says the Gemara, the one who can carry it on his own is chayav. Like of it. Since the one who can carry it by himself is doing the real job, another person's just being there to help a little bit. So therefore, the one who can carry it on his own is chayav. Again, let's say go Reuven and Shimon. Reuven and Shimon are carrying a very big beam. Shimon can carry it on his own. Reuven can't carry it on his own. Says the Gemara, only Shimon is chayav. Because if you look at it carefully, who's really doing the carrying? Shimon is doing the carrying. Because he could, in theory, carry it completely on his own. In Reuven, all he's doing is this Messiah. All he's doing is helping it, make it slightly easier. For that, a person is not chayav. Says the Gemara, says the Gemara again, what is he doing? Why don't we say that Reuven, who can't carry it on his own, is helping, and therefore he should be chayav? When somebody helps, it's not considered a chiyuv. This is very important to be aside. That helping a job is not considered doing a job. And therefore, the one who's just helping is not chayav. Shimon that can carry it on his own is chayav. Reuven that can't carry it on his own is bottom. And now the Gemara tackles this din of Messiah. Messiah is a situation where a job can be done without this particular item. And the question is, he's helping, is he chayav? So the Gemara says, we're going to try and bring proof after proof whether Messiah, somebody who helps, yesh b'mamish, ein b'mamish. This is a complicated case. The halacha is a zov who sits on a chair, makes the chair tamei medus, which is avatuma. Right? What happens if the chair is balanced? If he puts a cushion on the chair, then the cushion's tummy, and the chair puts 10 cushions on the chair, all of them are tummy. What happens if underneath the legs of the chair he sticks pillows? He's got a chair with 4 legs. Underneath each leg there's 1 pillow. So the person sitting on a bed. There's 4 cloths underneath the 4 beds. Those days they used to sit on beds. A bed, if you take away 1 leg, the whole bed will fall down to the side. But Shimon says this top. Riding on an animal. You can stand on 3. So again, if a person is sitting on a chair, then we say that the chair can't manage without. But if he's sitting on an animal, and the animal's got 4 legs, and underneath the 4 legs, there's cloths, they're not tummy. It's very important. I don't know if you ever go to see a donkey or horse, you can find them sometimes lifting up a leg completely and carrying on eating or whatever they're doing. So you see, an animal does not need all 4 legs to stand. Mashenk in a bed, it does. So the bed is considered as if it's resting on all 4 cloths, therefore the tummy. The animal is not considered as if he's standing on all 4 legs, and therefore it's not all tummy. The 4th leg is not necessary, but there's no question about it. When an animal stands on 4 legs, the 4th leg helps. Maybe it's because Messiah, just helping, is not considered important, and therefore the 4th leg, which is just helping, is even mamish. What happens is, by a 4th leg, Rabbi Yehuda says, it's not even helping. Rabbi Yehuda says, what's my proof? Because sometimes we see an animal lifting up a leg for an extended period of time without leaning on it at all. So you can't even consider the 4th leg as a helping leg. It's not needed at all. Since it's not needed at all, therefore the leg is not matame. Says the Gemara, no, I don't agree with that. The kivan the zimn alcohol. Sometimes the animal will lift. An animal's got 4 legs. One time we'll lift up the right leg, right front leg, then the left front leg, then the back leg. So each time it lifts up a different leg. So lahavik zov mahasapich. It should be like a zov that rolls over. The halacha is, in order for a zov to make a bed at tummy, the majority of the zov has to be on the bed. This is very important. For a Zov to make a bed tummy, the majority of the weight of the Zov has to be on one bed. Now imagine a Zov sleeps across 4 beds. There's 2 ways that a person can sleep across 4 beds. I'll show you in the picture, but it's quite straightforward in one's mind, right? You can sleep across 4 beds like this, and you can sleep across like that. Meaning, you can sleep across 4 beds, where what happens is you're lying lengthways across the length of the bed. And then you roll over and roll over and roll over. And the other way to do it is to lie lengthways across the width of the beds. The nafkamina is that if you lie lengthways across the length of the beds, at any given moment, whichever bed you rolled on at that particular moment, most of the weight is being carried by one bed. So if he rolls over to the next bed, and then to the next bed, and then to the next bed, and the next bed, each time he rolls over, he will then end up using the most of his body will be on one bed. So therefore, all those beds will be tummy. If he lies like this, never will any of the beds carry most of his weight. Because if he rolls over, he'll end up having his head on one bed, his stomach on the other, and the legs on another. So therefore, never at any stage is he most of his weight being carried on one bed. So the halacha is not. He was lying across 5 benches, 5 beds, or 5 money belts. If he's lying lengthwise, like we explained before, where each time he's lying across the length, and he keeps rolling to make his tummy, because at any given moment he's lying across the whole bed. If he lies across the width waist, why? Because each time we say that he's lying on all 5 beds at the same time, and therefore none of the beds are carrying his weight. Yoshin, if he's sleeping, then when a person's sleeping, he moves in all kinds of positions. And therefore, even if he's lying across the width, it is possible that during the night, the Zov rolls around and ended up leaning most of his weight on one particular bed. So therefore, when a person's sleeping, we consider all the beds to be tummy. So we see, says the Gemara, that each bed is tummy because for a short period of time, he's sleeping on that one bed. For the Gemara, the same thing with an animal. An animal lifts one leg, then the other leg, then the other leg. Each time lifts up a different leg. So therefore, we should say they're all tummy because at each given moment, he's leaning on a different leg. Now he's leaning on those 3 legs, and he lies on these 3 legs. So the whole time he's using 3 legs to support himself. And anything which supports his Zov makes him tummy. The answer is it's not because of that. The reason why the legs don't make tumah onto the cloths beneath them is because we look at each leg as just helping, and since each leg is just helping, so therefore it's not, there's no tumah. And it's a right to have chista, the Messiah in Beimanush. And therefore, if one person's carrying a beam, and he can carry it on his own, and another person's just helping him along, the one who's helping him is Potter. Over Papa Mishpeit Rava, after Nonami Tanina, top of Sadi Gimel on the base, for some reason, not sure why it is, the Gemara tells us the horses lean most of the weight on the front legs, and donkeys on the back legs. If you ever get involved in animals, you might find that horses use most of the weight on the front legs, donkeys use most of the weight on the back legs. Therefore, Abiyasi says that the sus v'tame on his front legs and the zor and the chamor on the back legs. The sus supports himself on his front. The chamor al raglov and the donkey on his back. On the back legs. Either way, even if a donkey, let's say, leans on his back legs, but the front legs help him. That helping, an additional help is not important. And the Gemara now brings 2 more rayas to this principle, very straightforward raya, much easier ones. A kohen, when he does the avodah in the Beis Hamikdash, has to stand on the floor of the Beis Hamikdash. If he's wearing socks, the avodah is possible. If he stands on a bowl, let's say there's a bowl on the floor of the Beis Hamikdash, and he stands on a bowl, and he shechts while he's standing on the bowl, or he catches the blood and he's standing on the bowl, what's the din? Possible. Why? He's not standing on the floor of the Beis Hamikdash. Says the Gemara, what happens if he's got one leg on the floor of the Beis Hamikdash and one leg leaning on a bowl? What would you say? Would you say, look, he's standing on the one floor on the floor of the Beis Hamikdash is kosher? Or would you say, wait a second, but the other leg is being leaned on a bowl? What's the halacha? The halacha says, one foot on the bowl, and 1 foot on the floor of the Beis Hamikdash. Or, 1 foot on the stone, then we look. If we were to take away the bowl, or we take away the stone, most of his weight is on the 1 foot, which is on the floor of the Beis Hamikdash, and he's able to stand on that 1 foot. If not, psula. This is important. We're having this, for example, when you have to stand for Shmoneh Esrei. If you're leaning a little bit on the table, but the table, if you take it away, you would still be standing. That's called standing, because the table is just helping a little bit. The same thing by a Kohen. He has to stand on the floor of the Beis Hamikdash. The fact that he's got 1 foot leaning a little bit on a bowl or a stone doesn't disturb us. But if by taking away the bowl or the stone, he would fall down, so that's not called standing on the floor of the Beis Hamikdash. And therefore, that way is possible. So we see the same principle in Messiah in Bei Mamish. The fact that he's helping himself a little bit with the stone or the ball, that's not important. It says, similar halacha, kibur biyamin. The halacha is you have to catch the blood with your right hand. The Kohen's not allowed to catch the blood with his left hand. What happens if he catches it with his right hand? But the left hand just helps him a little bit. The left hand helps. So we see from all these places, from the animal which has got 4 legs, from the Kohen who's standing on the floor of the Beis Hamikdash, from the Kohen who's catching the blood with his right hand, and his left hand is supporting it. In all these cases, we see Messiah in Bei Mamish. That just helping a little bit, that's not important enough, and therefore that's not enough for a person to be considered as if it's a proper help. And therefore, if 2 people are carrying a heavy thing, one person can carry it on his own, and one person can't. The one who can carry it on his own is chayav, because the other person's just considered like a helper. A helper is not the same thing, and that's why if a Kohen catches the blood with his right hand, and his left hand is helping him, that's not considered important. He caught the blood in the right hand, and he's still, and that was good. That was a good Kabbalah Sada. Very good. Okay, we'll carry on over here. Mitzvah Sunday, 8 o'clock. Thank you, Shiur, for coming, keeping the Shiur thing. I'm wondering whether maybe we shouldn't do the Shiur on Friday. We'll have to consider it all. I don't know what the solution is. I feel bad not to. Right, so we'll see. Maybe people will listen to it later. Okay, there's a long time till Shabbos. Maybe we should just share another time. Okay, we'll have to work it out. Have a very, very good Shabbos. Hatzlacha with everything. Good Shabbos.
Good Shabbos.
Shabbos. Okay, we'll be in touch. So I'm ending the meeting for